Kate Chaplin,
Here voting.
Dwayne Bolt, not hearing it. What? Not hearing anything. Robin Sue,
Here voting.
Marie Yarborough,
Here voting.
Lily Simas, all right, Christy LaSquadra,
Here voting. And if Lily shows up, she's the other voting member for tonight.
okay, thanks. John Bench,
Here voting.
thank you. Susan Allen, John Eisenhower,
Here, non-voting.
Ingrid Kashmar,
Here voting.
and Jim Sawyer. Okay. So Ingrid, you have one, or Southwest, sorry, John Bench, you guys have one more that could vote.
I'll take the vote if you want, guys.
Who's that, John Eisenhower?
Yeah.
All right, so I have John Bench, John Eisenhower, and Ingrid Kashmar voting for Southwest. Heidi Lawson. Jessica Stewart.
I'm here. I think I'm voting.
Okay, Jessica Bass. Carrie Hayes,
Here voting.
Roger Sanamon.
I'm here and I wasn't going to vote, but I can.
I think you might need to. Thank you. Jennifer Bonilla. I don't believe she's attending based on a message I just received. Gary Burr,
Here voting.
Tom Reeve,
Here, not voting.
Darcy Throckmorton,
Here voting.
and Aaron Brown.
Here voting.
Thank you. Tammy Tripler. All right. I think I've probably gotten through everybody. Approval of a voucher has been going around by DocuSign. And then I will take a motion for the approval of the minutes from November 23, 2020.
So moved.
Second, Ingrid.
Ingrid, did you move it?
I seconded.
Susan, did you?
I moved it, yeah. Mhm.
Okay, thank you. So Susan McCready moved it, Ingrid second. Any questions or comments? Not seeing any. I will go through our list of voters. Heather Jones, approve. Susan McCready,
Yes.
Kate Chaplin,
I didn't realize I was muted.
Approved.
Robin Sue,
Approve.
Marie Yarborough.
Approved.
Has Lily joined us?
Yes, I'm here and I'm voting and I approve.
Thank you. Christy LaSquadra,
Approve.
John Bench,
Approve.
John Eisenhower.
Approved.
Thank you. Ingrid.
Approve.
Then I have Jessica Stewart,
Approve.
Carrie Hayes,
Approve.
Roger Sanamon,
Approve.
Gary Burr,
Approve.
Darcy Throckmorton,
Approve.
and Aaron Brown.
Approve.
Thank you, everybody. Moving on to public comment. I do believe we've had a couple of letters that I'm not going to read. Hopefully everybody has the link and has read through those. And I think they were, Mark, if I'm correct, they were a couple of, they were about 3 letters from MDES teachers thanking for the early release.
Heather, I can't get comment number 2 to open. I guess maybe I'm the only one, but if maybe somebody could forward that to me because I can't open.
I
that
couldn't
one.
either.
Okay, that's what I thought. I had heard someone else say that earlier at the high school meeting. Okay, I'll make note and have us get that to you guys.
It'll also be linked to the agenda because it's public comment. So we'll update that. And there were 2 separate letters. Thank you.
Okay, 2. Okay, great. Thank you. Reports and updates. Mark, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Heather. I will try to be succinct and leave time for questions because I know we have a lot of items this evening. I think the most important news is that Hancock County remains green as we speak. We've seen a recent surge across the nation and our country, but I can't give enough credit to our teachers, to our students, to our staff, all of our folks, administrators, and our community members for working really hard to do the right thing and keep our schools open. I'll talk more about that a little bit down further in the report. Budget process continues. We're going through all of our budgets. We had the high school this evening, and we've had a couple other presentations, but that process continues. And I think you're going to see from a 10,000 foot level a number of recurring themes, and that's carry forward, health insurance, and other items. I think that it's very prudent to take a look at the times we're in and adjust our budgets accordingly. But I would also caution us as well with carry forward. I know the board's aware of this, but it's not really an anomaly when you look at the carry forward that we're seeing in all of our budgets to date when we consider COVID. So we'll talk more about that at local levels, but I just wanted to acknowledge that. The support for the early release program by our community and by our boards has been incredible, and we appreciate that. Our teachers are working very, very hard. All of our employees are working very, very hard, but that time will no doubt provide a lot of support for our teachers, and it'll have direct impact for our students. So that's so important, and we appreciate that. I think the question on a lot of people's minds is asymptomatic testing or benchmark testing. And Matt Haney did a great job with his overview, but from an AOS perspective, I think the first thing I'd say is that when we have a positive case, I'm starting to get questions from people about what do we know, when do we know it, and who needs to know it. And I want to make sure that everyone, from the boards to the administration, to the staff, to the parents and our students, everybody knows that if we have a positive case in our schools and through contact tracing, we determine that you have a need to know, you're going to be contacted immediately. Our nurses take the lead on this process. We work through CDC, and we're completely transparent with that information. So that's probably a great segue to the benchmark testing we performed. Out of a potential of 362 employees, 352 were tested. Without getting into real specific details, the 10 that did not test were opt-outs and voluntary and appropriate to do so. Of the 352 tests performed, 4 were deemed inconclusive. Administration does not receive results of our employees, but we know through non-disclosure of names that 4 of the tests were inconclusive. That doesn't mean anything other than the test just needs to be reperformed. To date, I'm not aware of any positive case that has been identified through benchmark testing in any of our schools with those 352 cases or tests rather. Where do we go from here? Today, we started sentinel testing, and we will continue that tomorrow. So that will be happening on a weekly basis, and that resource will allow us to ascertain whether we have community spread of COVID in our schools. And I can't give enough credit to, number one, Carrie Eason, who really planned many of the details along with the hospital and implemented this, our nurses, and all the folks who, to say it was, to use a term textbook, I guess I could say that in this instance because it was seamless. Our staff were amazing. The community was just overwhelmingly cooperative and flexible in allowing us that late arrival time. And I knock on wood that we're just doing really, really well. So that segues into cases. Folks are asking what's happening in our schools. We've had 3 positive cases in our schools. And I say cases because we're not differentiating between staff and student. We had 2 cases at Connors Emerson School. Those cases were tracked through our nurse and administration and through CDC. And we have no evidence of any spread within our school on those 2 individual cases. Matt Haney referenced one at the high school. And additionally, we have no evidence of any spread within our school, nor any relation to those 3 cases. I just want to underscore, what does that mean? It means that our kids, our parents, our staff are doing an amazing job at following the protocols. We just need to hang in there. We've gone through 9 months of this, and wearing a mask is something we all need to do. Practicing good hygiene is something we all need to do. Physical distancing is something that we all need to do. But more importantly, and this is the hardest thing, and I feel it with my own family, and you should feel it with your own families. Thanksgiving is tough if you do it the traditional way, whatever traditional is for you. The December break's coming up. Whether you celebrate Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate, it's a time to gather, and we need to really think about that. I think our vulnerability is greatest when we're with our loved ones. And the fact that we've been able to keep our schools open is a testament to our kids, our parents, our teachers, our staff, because we're doing the right thing and we're following the science. I just can't underscore enough that the most important things that we've done are going to be really important in the next couple weeks. I have to commend our teachers and our staff because it's hard. They've had Herculean efforts to keep our schools open, and both the physical and the emotional and the social emotional toll is great on everybody. But we just need to know that there's light at the end of the tunnel, and we're doing a great job together. We have a lot of support. We're incredibly blessed in our community with the resources, the science, and all the things around us. So it is a tough time, but as we close out 2020, I think 2021 will be our greatest time. And I think that many, many positives are coming. So a vaccine's coming. Our testing is going well. Our teachers and our staff are working very, very hard. And I cannot thank the board enough for their support and the communities enough for their support. Thank you, Heather. That's my report.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions?
I just have a comment. I just wanted to really give a shout out to Mark and his team, because the communications and the updates that have come out have been really great. And I just wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you, Susan. Other questions? Thank you, Mark, very much. Julie, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Heather. I have a couple of updates that I was asked to provide, and then I will launch into data, which is some people's favorite thing and other people not, but we'll make it as painless as possible and then get on to the other 16 things we have to do tonight. People were asking about an update on the anti-racism task force. As of the meeting that will be this Thursday, the students will be rotating facilitation of the meetings. There are 5 members of the task force who will be engaging in a 2-day Racial Equity Institute training with the community sponsored by the Y and the working group that's in Bar Harbor. And as Matt mentioned, the task force has selected 3 priority areas. 1, productive discussions around hard topics, including race. 2, resources and professional development. and 3, an improved system for addressing incidents of racism. And so the task force will be working in subgroups and then working as a whole group on those particular topics. And I don't know what else anybody has any questions about, but I'm happy to answer. Well, I think this is the 6th meeting this week.
Julie, at any point in time, does it make sense to have the group meet with us in the new year?
So the group is scheduled to meet with you at your June meeting.
Oh, the June one.
Yeah. But you know, if there was a reason to meet with them sooner, I don't know that there's anything conclusive to say at this particular point. I'm certain there will be things in June that will be able to be presented.
Okay, we'll leave it there unless it seems like at some other point in time it's necessary for them to meet.
So I just want to talk about professional development a little bit. We have really put a pause, except for on individual professional development, until this month. K-8 math teachers have been working with Erin Oliver, who's been working with our math coaching, and she'll be doing that in these informal Google Meets throughout the spring. We are continuing with our mindfulness support through Lana Penley. And we're going to continue with our Touchstone support, which is the support for the discussion training that we're doing in many middle school and high school classrooms. We will have 4 collaboratories that'll be starting this next month. One on diversity, equity, and inclusion, one on civil discourse, one on trauma-informed practices, and one on restorative justice. And all of those will have updates throughout the spring. Jackson Lab and the hospital will be doing presentations for the middle and high school students on COVID-19 this week on Tuesday and Wednesday, tomorrow and Wednesday. We will have a second speaker in the parent support series, Chris McLaughlin, about taking care of yourself as a caregiver during the holidays. The K-8 survey for semester 2 options, I think you all know, is out. As of right now, we have responses concerning 626 students. We are missing about 235, so we're getting there, maybe 3/4 of the way. We also have heard from some homeschool families, and I'll talk a little bit more about the homeschooling numbers when I talk about the data. And I think that's it before we go into data discussion, unless there's any questions on any of that.
I'm not seeing any hands, Julie.
Okay, so let's launch into data. Josh, if you don't mind presenting for me, we can go through this. There's a lot of information. I've tried to make it as straightforward as possible. And I'm very happy to talk with anyone more at another time. So we can go to the first slide, please. These are the 3 questions that I heard from the board. Next slide, please. Are students behind because of the COVID-19 pandemic? Do our kids seem to be okay? And if our kids are behind, how will they catch up? And so that's what I've tried to address in this presentation. Next slide. So I've just arranged the presentation into those 3 questions, and I'll proceed with data that supports my answer. Are students behind because of the COVID-19 pandemic? Now, the next couple slides are complicated after I tell you what we did to analyze the data that we had. Next slide. So we looked at fall 2019 to fall 2020 NWEA data for students in grades 4 through 8 for whom we had the 2 scores last year and this year. Now that's very different than we usually do. We usually do fall to spring and look at a year's worth of growth, but we can look at the data this way. And we also looked at the 18-19 data to see how the fall to fall accounted for the summer slide in comparison with previous years. We also reviewed DRA2 data for students in grades 1 and 2 relative to the previous year's reading benchmarks. So for example, we looked at the DRA scores for grade 1 to see how many students had met the kindergarten end of year benchmark. And for grade 2, how many had met the first grade end of year benchmark. Next slide. Did we skip a slide? Yeah, thank you. So we looked at achievement. Did students stay in the same achievement band in 2019 and 2020? In other words, if they were a high achiever, did they stay in that highest band? If they, in the quartiles that I usually talk about, if they were in, did we see any slide? Were there patterns the same across grades, or were there certain grades that were of concern? We also looked at growth, the percentages of students who met their growth. And again, we looked across grades, across schools, and how that compared with the year before. Next slide, please. Okay, so we looked at math. Now, this is a very confusing chart. I'm just going to walk you through it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this chart or the reading chart. I'm going to get to the conclusions, but if you go back to it, then you'll be able to see a lot of how I got there. What we did was we looked from 4th to 5th grade. If you look over on the left-hand side, 5th to 6th grade, 6th to 7th, 7th to 8th. That number is the number for whom we had 2 scores. As I have reported in the past, way over to the left is quartile 1. In our district, that's below the 50th percentile nationally. So in other words, a quarter, we're looking at the number of our students who are below the halfway point nationally. When we first started this many, many years ago, there were a quarter of our students in that bucket, a quarter in 50 to the 65th percentile, a quarter in quartile 3, 66 to 89th, and a quarter over 90th. Why do I present it this way? Because many people want to know, number one, are our students who are most challenged and for whom we provide targeted support, making a year's worth of growth. That's quartile 1. Are our strongest students making a year's worth of growth? Those are our kids above the 90th percentile. There's a lot of belief that you can't make a year's worth of growth as easily. That's not true. Quartile 3 and quartile 4 are students who are considered based on the SAT and ACT correlation studies to be on track for college and career. And quartile 2 is a quartile that we often see kids who might need a little bit extra support in order to get on track. So from 4th to 5th grade, you'll notice that the percentage in F2020, the fall of 2020, is higher than it was in the fall of 2019. That's not good. That means that more kids were in that lower quartile. You'll notice that the number went up for quartile 2, which in 4th to 5th grade and 6th to 7th grade, and you have to look at quartile 3 in conjunction with that. So if it goes down in quartile 3 and it goes up in quartile 2, that means you've had some fallback. That means you've had some slide. So you can see that that happened. And then from 5th to 6th, we had slide in quartile 3, quartile 2 over to quartile 1. And you see as the grades went up that things stayed fairly stable. And in 7th to 8th grade, it was very stable in math. Can we look at the next slide for reading? So the shaded places are where it stayed basically the same. And you can see for reading, we had a lot more stability than we did for math. Math was much more volatile. Reading was much more stable. We even had some decreases in quartile 1 from 6th to 7th and 7th to 8th. People can see that where the arrow is going down. 4th to 5th grade, we saw some decrease in that higher end. But basically in quartiles 3 and 4 in reading, for students in grades 4 through 8, we did not see that much slide. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the percentage of students in each grade who made their growth target in math and in reading. So over to the left, grade 4, math is the top one, reading is the one below it. It's in red if it's below 50%. It's in yellow if it's between 50 and 60%. And it's in green if it's over 60%. From 60 to 80% of your students making their growth target, that's considered a high-performing school by NWEA. So that's why I'm using those colors. You can see here a different way of seeing the same exact data as I showed a different way before for math. 36% of our students district-wide from grades 4 through 8 for math made growth. 60% of our students from grades 4 through 8 in reading made growth. Next slide. What about our most vulnerable learners? So I looked at 2 different groups. Jill and I looked at 2 different groups. I need to give a shout out to Jill for doing this incredible amount of analysis with me. Students with IEPs. So in math, students with IEPs met their growth at about the same rate as their peers without IEPs. In reading, the percentage of students with IEPs who met their growth target was close to that of their peers, 55 versus 60%. And overall, 20% more students with IEPs made their growth target in reading than math. Well, I wanted to show you that because there's this belief that maybe our students with IEPs would be doing much worse than the population as a whole. And that just is not true, which is a testament to our teachers in special education. Next, please. So what about our less affluent students? So again, they did not make growth at a significantly different rate than did their peers. Again, in math, 33 versus 36%, reading 56 versus 60%. And because of the numbers, that might be 1 or 2 kids. And overall, 23% more met their growth target in reading than math. So again, that's pretty good news. It's not good news overall for math, but it's pretty good news that these particular groups, number 1, were performing at about the same rate. And number 2, there wasn't any artificial drag because of a particular group. Okay, so that tells us that in our general programming, we have a widespread issue. It's not an issue that is only focused on one program or one population. Next slide, please. So the conclusions about math learning and growth. So there was a lot of volatility. You saw that in the math scores, and math took a serious hit across the grade levels 4 through 8. The math workshop model that we recommend, that we're using, that we're trying to implement with Fidelity is matches one of the most preferred intervention models. So if we just implement that, and that's part of the reason why I brought back the professional development support, we should be able to make some serious gains. We need to do a strong focus on the high leverage concepts that help the student the next year to be successful and in problem solving. And we need to make sure that there's enough time for math instruction and practice. That's especially important this year. We do know that our intervention resources have been reallocated and or stretched, and we need to perhaps look at a spring and summer tutoring model, which we can do in an interesting way, because even with students who are in person, we can have tutors who are remote. So that's one thing that we can look at. Next slide, please. So conclusions around reading. There was less impact on reading. You saw that. The patterns were consistent. And that said, even though it was less, it's still an area of concern. There's still 40% of our kids who did not make a year's worth of growth. Again, the reading workshop model that we use is the intervention, matches the intervention models that they're recommending. And we need to look at whether extra time and emphasis on reading instruction might be helpful for grades 3 and 4. Next slide, please. We looked at our early reading achievement. Now, this is a little bit different than what I usually present too. I was trying to figure out how to do it. We looked at grade 1 students in the fall, what the percentage was that met last year's benchmark. So grade 1 students who are meeting the end of year kindergarten benchmarks and grade 2 students who are meeting the end of year first grade benchmarks. I know I said that before, but I just want you to know what you're looking at. So 68% across the district in grade 1 met those benchmarks. The 86% is a 3-year average from past years. Just so you really know what we're looking at. So we're looking at 68% compared with 86%. And then the 50% is compared with 69%. So we're looking at an issue of 18% and then an issue of 19% for both of those groups. Let's see, next slide, please. So there was a significant negative impact. Again, the reading workshop model that we use in K2 is really what we need to be using. We need to be using it with fidelity, and we need to be doing all of the pieces of it. Extra time and emphasis in reading instruction may be helpful for grades 1 and 2. I will say that many teachers are working with much smaller groups than usual, and they are seeing good growth in reading this fall, but there is concern about some students. And intervention resources have been, as I said before, reallocated or stretched thin. In many cases, intervention teachers are doing something other than math or reading intervention this year. They're teaching a pod, class of kids, etc. Next slide, please. So what do we look like in comparison with the national data? Well, across the country, there's a large negative impact on early reading instruction. And there's a bigger negative impact on math than reading in grades 3 through 8. And our data matches those patterns. Next slide, please. We have some additional advantages that many districts across the country do not have. We've been able to offer in-person teaching and learning, as you know. That fosters relationship building and routines, and that supports continued growth, whether we're in person or if we have to go remote. We have purchased devices and a K4 platform for workflow and Wi-Fi access for families, and we're now one-to-one district-wide K-12. And we're standards-based, so we can focus on key knowledge and skills to help students to be ready for the next grade. And we have a language of the standards that we can use to communicate where kids need additional support. All of these are things that actually will help us to actually help kids to gain ground and to make good progress. Next slide, please. We did see a 150% increase in homeschooled students this year. We had 50 students, K-12, re-enrolled as a homeschooled students. Those are families who have homeschooled for 2 or 3 or 4 or more years. They registered with the state as homeschool students. This year, new for 2020-2021, there were 77 new students who were registered as homeschool families. That is a trend that we're seeing throughout Maine. I don't have national data on that. We're seeing in the surveys that some of those, what I will call newer homeschooled students from this year only, are asking to either come back in person or to come to the virtual academy program. I don't know what that will look like ultimately when we get all the survey results. Next slide, please. So do our students seem to be okay? Well, to answer this question, I've been talking to lots of people all over the place, and I reached out to all of our administrators, to many of our district office people who've been working with kids across the schools, and I just want to report back what I heard and what I've observed, because at every school I've observed kids outside multiple times. Next slide, please. So in general, yes, students seem to be okay. This is, again, mostly focused on K-8. This whole report is mostly focused on K-8. I left it to Matt to really report on the high school. Almost all of our students have adapted surprisingly well to all of the COVID-19 protocols. We were worried about that. It has turned out not to be a big concern. Most seem very, very happy to be in school in person. The small student to teacher ratios seem helpful in being able to check in with students, each student each day, also in socialization and in building community. The routines and making school feel normal seems to be helping students stay steady and focused, and being outdoors more has clearly resulted in fewer behavior issues. That is across the board. And then at different schools, we have some additional happy things to report, but this is really the picture across the board. Next slide, please. We do have some students who are at risk, and I'm just listed here those that had been mentioned in any of the categories or that I myself knew from our virtual academy family. So you can see all the reasons why students are at risk. They're not surprising. They are, in general, these would be issues that would put students at risk in any case, but we have more students with financial strain and food insecurity with additional stress or responsibility because of medical fragility. The magnification of when a family member is experiencing a serious illness or when there's been a death is even bigger during this time. Some of the students trying to participate remote only are not doing as well as we would like. And some, you saw the great number of homeschooled students. Many of those students will come back. They will be absolutely fine. They will be either equal or ahead to their peers in schools, but there will be a sizable number of them who won't have had comparable teaching and learning experiences, and they'll be coming back needing additional support when they come back to school. Next slide, please. So what are we doing? Well, we're trying to provide social emotional support. We're doing the collaboratory on trauma-informed teaching, as I mentioned. We're working with food distribution. We're really trying to keep routines and structures in place, whether that's in person or whether that's in the virtual academy. And we are really trying to work and increase partnership with and outreach to families. Next slide, please. So if students are behind, how will they catch up? Next slide. We have a bunch of strategies that are in place for helping students catch up. We have very small teacher to student ratios. Those are our pods. We have the ability to have high fidelity to the math and reading workshop models. We have increased academic time. This is a pro and a con, but it's less disrupted because we have smaller groups. They have fewer specials, which is not a good thing necessarily. But in terms of trying to catch kids up academically, we actually have more academic time than we had, even though it doesn't seem like that. By making school as normal as possible and by celebrating games, we get students into a flow that enables them to engage. We are considering additional tutoring support. We have intervention services and special education services. And last summer, we felt like our hybrid remote summer school had a bigger impact on what we were able to do with kids, because kids who couldn't get a ride to summer school or for whom times and schedules were challenging, we were able to reach through one-on-one remote support. And so we need to consider that model for this coming summer as well. Next slide, please. And this is the last slide. And I want everyone to just take a deep breath and remember that kids are really, really resilient. You can make more than a year's worth of growth in a year's time. We have strong teachers. COVID slide is not a reason to qualify for an IEP. everybody in the entire world is facing the same challenges, and we are in the middle of a pandemic. And so with that, I'll ask Josh to put that presentation away, and I'll take any questions.
Julie, thank you. And I will toggle between my two screens to see if there's any questions. John, Bench, and then Marie, and then Christy, I see.
Putting that together, Julie. Do you see any of the measures that you guys had to take because of COVID being transferred into a non-COVID world, like the kids being outside more and less behavior issues and things like that?
Maybe. If we had an island-wide middle school, that would increase the chances that we could have kids more outside and doing interdisciplinary projects and place-based stuff with dedicated adults. Because part of the challenge when we are in school the way school used to be is that all of the adults are incredibly highly scheduled. And it's much harder to pull apart time because everyone's understanding of a full program has a lot crammed into it. I think it's definitely worth looking at.
Thank you. I had Marie and then Christy.
What are some of the things that you may be looking at right now for the fall in terms of changes or interventions that you want to see translate? We have a vaccine that we all hope is very hopeful. I'm hoping that leads to more in-person school time for kids. It may not. In that case, what are the things that you're thinking are going to translate forward, and how are those things going to change? Yeah, thank you.
So I think I don't know yet. I think some of the things that we're doing with the Virtual Academy program are interesting. I don't know that we would continue that kind of a thing when there wasn't a COVID reason, but I don't know what the context will look like next year. I do think just an increased use of in-person and video because the access has opened up in some interesting ways. So for example, our ELL teacher is able to work one-on-one with students in different schools, all at different times, and kids are used to now working with that one-on-one on a screen. And so that intervention has been really pretty successful. I'm thinking about and playing about planning to work with teachers on some ideas that I think are going to be interesting, but I'm also open to anything that you have to suggest that you think would be worth considering. I don't think we know enough yet. I think at the end of the year, we're going to do a lot of the data collection again, and we're going to know for this year what happened in a different way. I don't think we know yet. It may not be nearly as grim as people assume it will be.
Okay. Thank you, Julie. Christy?
Well, I mean, looking at your data, and it feels grim to me. I hope you're right. But it feels grim because it looks like that data is based on 2.5 months of being remote. And then next year, we're going to look at a whole year of being off and on, remote, hybrid. And one thing you said, and I guess this is my question, is you talk a lot about using the data to structure your budgets and where you put your resources. And so what I'm wondering is I'm looking at, well, K through 8 more, our math interventionist is now teaching math, not doing math intervention. Our reading interventionist has taken a year's leave of absence. And, you're trying to shuffle people around, but it looks like on any given day, right lately, Connors Emerson has had double digits of staff members out for various reasons. And so then you're pulling your ed techs and your special ed teachers to cover for your classroom teachers who are out. And so I guess my question is, do we need to focus on staffing for the fall, adding positions, making sure that we fully have these interventionalist position staff, that we have long-term substitute teachers, so we're not constantly pulling our ed techs? I mean, I guess that's where I'm seeing, I know Barb has presented a budget for if we're still in COVID times, we need these positions versus if we're not in COVID times. But should we be focusing on putting these positions in, budgeting these positions to make sure that we do have the staff to do the things that you're saying we need to do?
I think the situation right now is pretty different at the different schools. So I don't know that there's one answer. I definitely think that our intervention teachers are highly skilled and that when they are able to work with students, it's very helpful, especially when they're able to work in the classroom supporting students with the teacher there. It's a very powerful model, a push in rather than pull out. Schedules and pods are confounding all of this, Christy, in a way that it's very hard to describe. I mean, if you don't need 3 teachers for 30 kids, you only need 2 teachers and they each have 15, then you have another teacher that's automatically there who can be the interventionist. But when you have to have 1 teacher to 10 kids because of pods and space, it's not necessarily that you don't have enough people, it's that the way you have to use people is different. I think your question is well worth looking at in each given school, and I am confident that all of the principals have a pretty good answer of what they'd like to do in terms of staffing for next year.
Thank you for the question, and thanks. Carrie.
Just 2 quick comments. One is that I fully am behind ramping up the summer school options. My daughter's done summer school for math for a couple of years. And this year, especially this summer, we saw huge leaps with that, with the one-on-one. So I applaud that program and hope we can expand that to its fullest capacity. The other thing is I wonder about utilizing some of our kids to help other kids. I mean, I know, without sports and activities after school, my kids have so much more free time right now that is mostly spent in front of a television. If they could be reading to a younger student or something like that, if we could set up some, mentor across grades, I would love to see my daughter reading to somebody rather than watching the, 12th episode of the day of Vampire Diaries. So there you go.
There's a number of tutoring models that are peer-to-peer that have some real power to them. It's something that we can certainly look at and explore. Right now, the 2 biggest challenges are the fact that the schedules in each building are very, very different. So coordinating who matches with whom when has been extremely challenging, even for our regular staff. So we would need some, to think carefully about how to coordinate all of those pieces. And then there's a lot of research out there that says that if you train your tutors, you train your high school or college kids, and then they work with, 1 or 2 kids on a long-term basis, you can see some real power. It will be challenging to figure out how we can do that training, but it's all possible. It's all something that we should consider going forward. And now that we have like a baseline, I'm motivated to really think about how we can make sure that we turbocharge as much as we can.
And I'm not even thinking about something that complicated, Julie. I'm just thinking like if we tell our kids after regular school hours. I mean, Erin's done it too every day. If she had a kid that she was going to call up and just read a book to him at 4 o'clock every day and just do a one-on-one Zoom. I mean, Just seems like we've got a lot of kids with time on their hands.
It's a great idea, and I certainly will explore it. It is a little bit more challenging than you think. There's a lot of families that don't want other kids beaming in with the video. There's a lot of things to consider, and so, but it's a good idea. And I'm not saying no. I'm just saying it's complicated given the way we're having to operate right now.
Understood, and thank you for everything you're doing.
I have Kate, and then we're going to move on to the next topic.
I just wanted to say that I really like that idea, Carrie. And I think even for the high school students, I've always felt like, particularly in the AP classes and in some of the more advanced classes, that having set up study groups that can meet outside of class or just work together makes a lot of sense. I know we're talking about elementary school right now, but I think that type of idea could translate to the middle schoolers as well, where you pair people off just to do their homework together. And
yeah, we're doing a lot of that with
you are already.
Yeah. And it's actually kind of interesting the way that's happening. It's easier to do actually virtually than it is when they're in person, because they have to maintain distance and they can't work with each other closely and everything.
Right. Okay, thanks. But yes, sounds great. Everything you're doing, I fully.
Oh, I am not trying to look for accolades. I just want you guys to feel informed and just to understand that we're in a really complicated time, and I am totally open to suggestions. So thank you for everybody's good thinking. I know we have a lot more on the agenda, so you know my email.
Thank you very much, Julie. I'm going to move on to the update from school psychologists, and I'll turn it over to you, Melissa. But first, I just want to say welcome to Dan and Stephanie. I appreciate you all being here tonight, and we look forward to hearing. So, Melissa, I'll turn it over to you.
So they're going to jump probably right in, but you should have all received their one-page handout. It should be attached to the agenda. Hopefully you all got that, and let us know if you didn't. And then I think Dan's gonna start. They're gonna start with introducing themselves and then tell you each what they've been up to.
Great, thank you.
All right, good evening, everyone. Hi, I'm Dan Rinkowitz, and my last name is pronounced Wrinkle, like on my forehead, and Witz, just so you know, last name. It's hard to believe it's been 7 months since the last time I saw some of you guys at the June school board meeting. That was a long meeting, I remember that. I wanted to share some more about me. So personally, I've worked with children for about 27 years. I began my career working at the Devereaux Foundation, which is a residential center. I did that for about 8 years as I got my graduate studies under my belt. And then for the last 19 years, I've been a certified school psychologist in Wilmington, Delaware. It's a pretty large school system with about 16,000 students. Personally, I grew up in Pennsylvania. I'm married to my wife for 23 years, and I visited MDI 23 years in a row, guys. We never missed a year. I love running. That's something about me. And one thing I like to put my cap on, I started the first boys running team in elementary school. So 3rd and 4th graders, a group called Let Me Run. And in that, it teaches elementary boys about how to be different. It's okay to be social. It's okay to show your emotions. It's okay to show your feelings and how to handle anger and do it in an appropriate way. If you're wondering how our caseloads were designed, we were based on the student/special ed enrollment, the types of programs that each offered, the geography of the location. I'm noticing the distance between schools here, living on the island now, and our background and experience. My schools now are Connors Emerson, Mount Desert, Trenton, Frenchboro, and the Cranberry Isles. My focus this fall first was to try to onboard to Maine's system of education, which is way different than what I'm used to. Have learning the state regulations. I've had eligibility meetings. I'm looking at diagnoses and looking at the procedures that are used here in Maine. I'm looking at the different resources that are available on and off the island, such as hospitals and different counseling options. I'm continuing to build parent, school, and staff relationships. To me, that's a key. I want to really be interwoven with the community here. I'm meeting with the school principals as I can to support each of their school's unique needs. And every school so far, guys, is really unique to me. What I like to do and what I'm observing is there's a great attention to students' needs. There's a very talented staff here. I actually got to travel on the Beal and Bunker mailboat for the first time, and I've explored a tiny island school. That was an experience in itself. Jack, the captain, his dog, it was such a good experience. And a school with 2 rooms, that was something new to me. My appreciations is I love all the kindness and support from administration and all the school staff. I feel it. It's a small, close-knit community. And one good thing I like to do that I think Melissa and Paige have enjoyed is when I test the students, I ask them the 3 wishes. And you'd be very surprised what comes out of their mouths sometimes, guys. The overall arching theme is for COVID to go away. That's what I'm seeing mostly here. So with that, I'll have Stephanie share her information as well, okay? Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. All right, my name is Stephanie Loke. It's nice to meet everyone. And just before anybody asks, no, I'm not related to any of the other Logues on the island. I did grow up in Maine in the Bangor-Orono area, but then married an Air Force guy and traveled everywhere. But all throughout those 25 years, promised that we would get to retire in Maine. And that's happening next year. So that's very exciting for us. I did do my school psychology graduate work in Texas. So I worked in Texas for a time, and then Idaho and England in New Mexico. So all very highly diverse communities, large migrant populations, military communities, obviously. So I've worked with a variety of students throughout the years. Since I've been here, worked really hard to, like Dan mentioned, the Maine regulations are very different. Luckily, I'm sort of used to getting to new states, and they're all very different. So I'm used to learning the new regulations, and it takes about a year to learn a new state and their regulations and the district and how they function, because they're all different. So definitely been learning about that. Dan mentioned the schools that he's at. So I'm at the other one. So I'm at the high school. I'm at Pematic. I'm at Tremont and Swans, and having a good time getting to know all of those individual schools. As you can imagine, it's a little bit more challenging time to onboard and get to know everybody. My favorite moments are definitely when I get to be in the schools and working with people in person. It's definitely a challenge having all of our IEP meetings this way. It's a little bit harder to make the connections, but it's good to work with the parents and help their kids the best that we can. One of the other challenges that we've had that's been different, as Dan mentioned, we're used to big districts, and they take care of all of our testing supplies for us. So learning how to fill out a purchase order and get that submitted properly to get the things that we need. So that's been a new experience. It's good for the brain to do new things. Let's see, what else? One of the biggest things that I appreciate, Paige Collins, can I give a shout out for helping us get onboarded? She's done a wonderful job of answering all of our questions and helping us learn about the community. One of the big differences for me has been, as I mentioned, large districts, very transient. I've never been in a place where, the parents of the children, we're in special education as well. And so we're, everybody knows their families, and it's a huge, valuable resource. So it's been great using everybody's knowledge and getting to know the communities. That's been a wonderful thing for me. And I've been very, very, very impressed with all of the staff that I've worked with. Everybody is just so knowledgeable and professional, and they know what they're doing. And that's honestly not something that I've always experienced in my previous districts. And so that's a huge shout out to everybody here, that you guys have developed such a strong staff here. And it makes my job so much easier. So good job with that. Just like Dan mentioned, one of the highlights so far has been taking the boat out to the island. And I took a gazillion pictures. I got to watch the sunset as I came back after a wonderful day of testing. So that's definitely been one of my highlights. One of the things I was asked to talk about was kind of what we've been up to. And so between Dan and myself, we've completed approximately 45 evaluation. And that's been a mixture of initial evaluations, all the 3-year reviews, and then also finishing up some of the testing that was not able to be completed in the spring because of COVID. There were things that they were still wanting to get done. And so we've been finishing up that as well. So that's been kind of one of our focuses this fall. I think that's all I want to say. I'll turn it back over to Dan.
Okay, guys, thank you very much. And one of the other points I wanted to bring up, we were asked to talk about how we're supporting families, the schools, and the communities. So, you know, this is going to take some time for us as we're getting to know everyone, right? But from our experience, we're trying to provide expertise of evaluating and offering true recommendations to try to support the students, parents, and schools. We're reviewing and implementing different procedures this time with the help of Paige and Melissa's oversight, looking at different risk screenings and different kind of assessments that we can use to apply to today's times and to support the district. We're providing ongoing behavioral consultations and interventions. I see some of the principals here. So Mike, I know we've worked together a little bit already, so I can't wait to continue to build these relationships and see how Stephanie and I can support you guys. We're also collaborating to present professional development topics as we can. We're informed of this new collaboratory for trauma-informed practices. Stephanie and I are going to do that, head that up in January. And also providing RTI resources and processes at each school. And we're trying to determine how to be used as the best resource we can for the schools that we're in. Response intervention is a very important part of trying to help reading. And I really hope we can look into that as well. So I just wanted to share those notes and highlights that we have. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, both of you, very much, and welcome. And you've been quite busy. Does anyone have any questions? I don't see any hands. Well, thank you very much for joining us tonight and for sharing what's been going on. We'll be sure to have you back again to hear more as you continue to get to know the community and work on the various resources to support the families. So thank you. Thanks, Melissa.
Thanks for your time, guys.
Ingrid, do you have an update on the AOS 91 restructuring group?
I would just say that we had our second meeting last week. We've all been given some homework assignments that we're supposed to have completed by the end of December, and we're meeting the middle of January with the hopes of kind of having a framework in place that we would then send off to these attorneys to see what comments he might have. And so I would imagine that maybe we might have something to look at the February meeting, certainly, definitely by the March meeting.
Okay, thanks, Ingrid. Yep. All right, I'm going to move on to discussion items. Mark, I will turn it over to you for operations manager salary and benefit comparison.
Thank you, Heather. Hopefully everybody, we sent that out last week and it's linked to the agenda. So if anybody's watching and they pull that up, we have a draft job description. And basically what we did is we took the priority items or feedback we received from building principals and others and really tried to focus on two key areas, and that's maintenance and transportation. And I can't emphasize enough that this position is not to supplant or replace any of the great people we have in our buildings. This is about coordinating and collaborating. So many of the areas we have not been able to focus on, and that's professional development, that's continuity of purchasing, coordination of projects, where we might be able to maximize purchasing power. We've tried to incorporate that within this job description. We've also tried to make it flexible enough so that, the right person, he or she, may have expertise in one particular area, but knowing they can draw off some of the expertise of some of our area resources. So you have that, as well as what we tried to show as just some exemplars in terms of salary and benefit comparisons for similar types of positions. If you look at our enrollment, approximately 1,500 students, the size of our district, it's not uncommon for a district like this to have a food service director, a transportation director or coordinator, and a maintenance director. And that, as you well know, all goes to our schools. And our schools do an amazing job, and our staffs do. But much of the coordination and much of the legwork falls to our principals right now. And I recognize the times we're in, but now more than ever, we can see our weaknesses, our challenges, our vulnerabilities. And we hire our principals as educational leaders. And I can't emphasize enough that this position would really go a long ways towards moving forward the things I talked about earlier, but more importantly, really validating our principals as the educational leaders that they are. And I'm pleased to take any questions about the position or the comparisons.
Are there any questions? Christy and Robinson.
Mark, I was looking through the list of responsibilities, and it's a pretty daunting list. And I see that our principals are the people who are doing a lot of this, or in some of our buildings, I guess we have, like, for example, Connors Emerson does have like a maintenance director type position, and Peter Alley, who does, I think, a lot of this and reports to Barb. And what I'm wondering is, down the road, can this person do all these things? And are we looking at, adding more positions for people to support this position and helping them do these things? It looks like a pretty deep, deep well we're gonna go down, and not that it's not needed, but it concerns me that can one person do all these things for all these different schools, or are you gonna need contact people at all these other schools, hopefully besides the principal, who carry out some of these duties for the maintenance director? And I guess maybe I'm jumping ahead several years or a year, but I'm just curious.
I think a lot of that, Christy, Heather, may I respond?
Yes, please.
A lot of that, Christy, really, if you think about transportation for a second, 2 of our member schools contract out, and whether they continue to do that or not, and whether or not other communities want to continue down that road. So that's a big factor with that. Do I envision bringing on more people here? I think the transportation question is a big piece. But the second piece, and we haven't really included it, but we know that food service needs attention. Our building personnel who do a great job there, again, coordination and facilitation, and really the expertise of each position. In and of itself, transportation is its own entity. Maintenance and is its own entity. I do believe through past experiences that a position like this for operations can work very closely with our principals and with our custodial staff, our maintenance staff, and our head custodians and directors we have at each building to further what we're doing and maximize efficiency. As I said before, that I can't underscore enough that each individual building is doing a nice job, but we can do better. And what I mean by that is we can do better by combining all those resources and collaborating. Being siloed inhibits us, and whether that's through teaching and learning or operationally, I think we're better for collaboration. And I think if we look beyond that, if we look beyond the educational system, whether that be, other areas, public safety, and other entities. We're one island. I recognize we're individual communities, but we can do so much more by working together. So I guess that's a broader answer of a tough question, but it's like Julie said before, only time will tell. I think this, if we go down this road and the board supports this, and I hope they do, I do believe we'll see the benefits, and I think we can go from there in terms of where we want to increase services or reallocate them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I have Robin Sue, and then I see you, Lily, too.
I think you kind of answered my question, Mark, but just I want to clarify. So do you think that down the road after this operations manager that we're still looking at a transportation director, one on its own, or is this operations manager sort of taking that role as well?
Robin Sue, to be direct, and answer your question, no, I think this position could incorporate both the way we're presently structured. And to be very honest, you know, if other communities decided to look at contracting out transportation services, I do believe there's enough capacity within the work in all of our schools to justify this position and then some.
Okay, Lily. Robin, so did you get your questions answered? Okay, Lily.
Well, I don't want to speak too soon, but Christy, hopefully with what we're coming up with in the restructuring group, it will put all of your concerns to rest. And this will be, the operations manager will be something that will actually help us get to where we want to go in our restructuring. I'm only saying this from my perspective. It's not what we've talked about amongst ourselves in the restructuring thing, but I'm feeling extremely positive and excited about the possibilities moving forward for us to restructure. So
Thanks, Lily. Carrie, and then yeah, Carrie.
There we go. I just want to say that I do a lot of operations in my work. I build conferences, produce conferences, and the idea of combining the resources of all the schools and the money that can be saved in doing that, I think is going to fund a good portion of the salary of this person. You know, buying in more bulk, buying more consistently, the negotiating, if we get somebody with good negotiating skills, they should be able to bring a lot of those costs down. So I'm all for a position like this. I am curious about the salary. The numbers on this sheet go all over the place from $10,000 up to $90,000. So I'm wondering what range, Mark, you think this falls into in our district.
So
yeah, Heather.
Yeah, yes, you can. But is that a question that's just going to segue us into the next topic, which is the budget? That was a question for you, Mark.
Certainly, I can answer that very
Why don't
succinctly.
you answer, and then we'll segue into the budget, please.
Absolutely. So, Carrie, what I tried to do, and maybe it didn't come across on the sheet, but I tried to highlight, because you're right, it's all over the board. Some of these communities that have similar positions, I know, or I've spoken to other superintendents, but like anything else, there are collateral duties assigned to positions. I tried to pick districts of similar size, fairly similar demographics, but you have some out in Western Maine, you have Ellsworth, but I tried to look at similar size, structure, and responsibility. And where Nancy and I settled in is, if you look at the $90,000 placeholder, that's what it is. It's a placeholder. We assume with benefits about $20,000 in benefits and about $70,000 in salary. So that's really our target.
No, not at all. I'm still in a board meeting. What's going on?
Hey, Barb, you will you mute yourself? I was trying to do it, but I can't seem to.
Her phone hasn't been, her house phone.
So,
hey, Josh, can you mute Barb? Oh, she's done. Right.
So, in short, I think the answer to the question is, Carrie, we think that's competitive with market value for, especially as the position comes in, like anything else, we'd evaluate it accordingly. but we do believe that would attract a qualified candidate in terms of what we're looking for scope and responsibility.
Thank you, Mark. And then why don't we pick up on the budget item? Carrie, I am assuming that answered your question.
Yes, it did. Thank you. And I really appreciate all the work you guys put into this, Mark. It's very thorough. So thank you.
Right. So Mark and Nancy, you want to tackle budget, please?
I'm gonna turn it over to the wizard, Nancy, to begin walking us through. The one thing before she begins is everybody's eyes are raised on carry forward, and I would just urge us all at this level and all of our local boards that we're in the middle of a pandemic, so we're seeing the result of COVID impacting all of us in all of our budgets. And I do hear loud and clear from board members about health insurance, and Nancy and I will circle back and look at data, but we'll also look at being able to network with industry professionals to see what we can do to sharpen our pencil on that. Of course, we always want to be on the right side of that. We never want to be wrong. So, but I just want to let you know we're paying attention on the health insurance piece. Nancy, please.
All right.
Hi. Yes, I would agree that we'll check, and we know that Blue Cross hasn't even started negotiating or anything yet, but one thing that we do need to keep in mind is that our budget is a very small budget in comparison to the schools with a number of people. So if there is a plan change or something, it does affect the budget quite a bit. So but we will check in with the professionals on that. If you want to go down through the budget, the carryover is coming in at a healthy carryover, and of course some of that is COVID related. And so we have with no increase, or I should say no additional items, as you can see, the increase in the assessment it's actually a decrease of $8,700. And including all of the additional items, the increase would be 9.9%, including all additional items. The OT and psych positions are ones that are they kind of flow in and out of the AOS budget because they're funded by either usage, where the OTs are, or the funding for the psych positions have several different places that the funding is coming from. Are there any questions on that section?
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm not seeing a draft. I'm getting a spinning wheel of doom. Is anybody else not able to see the draft budget? Or is it just me?
I think Selena linked the PDF if you're having trouble.
Kate, on November 23rd, Mark also sent it. I had the same problem, so I just went back to my emails.
Okay, thanks, Robin.
Otherwise known as Susan.
So
I'll circle back, Nancy, while you're talking, and I'll circle back and see what I can do to resend. I apologize.
Yeah, I think there was a PDF sent just in case people had trouble with the Excel version.
Right, thanks.
I think, we did kind of go through this before. There are several areas, basically we were trying to hold the line, where we could. There are a few areas that we had to tweak figures because of just expenses are more than anticipated, or in some cases less than anticipated.
So Nancy, that's what I was going to ask you. Like, are there any significant changes or adjustments since our last meeting when we went through this?
Actually, I think what we did was we tweaked the the adjustments, I think the negotiated agreements line where the increases were, and there were a couple of adjustments for the HRA.
Okay.
But basically, I believe it's about the same as what you had before.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I don't know if there are any areas that anybody had questions on in the various sections of the budget, or if you want to go down through it, whichever way you want to do it.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Are there questions? Because we did go down through it before, and we've had some of the smaller some of the adjustments. But are there specific questions from people?
Oh, there's one.
Oh, John.
Just this is I'm curious. How do you, with the next round of contract negotiations coming up, how do you figure that out into budgets when you're forecasting without knowing what the result will be?
We put a placeholder, John. It's really, there's no science to it, but we put a number like health insurance as a placeholder, and we put that under negotiated agreements. And obviously, we always hope that we're accurate, that the number we put in does not drive the process, because at the end of the day, whatever the board agrees to and is settled on is what we will ultimately deliver. So it is, it's planning just like insurance and any other entity. I think any superintendent would say the same thing. Nancy, do you want to add anything?
No, it's a little, it's very hard to, looking forward, and we've tried to do our best to, put enough in there to take care of any of the situations. One thing that we do have,
John, if we don't, we have to find the money within our approved budget. That's the bottom line. We don't have a chance. We can't go back and ask for more. We have to find it within our existing budgets.
And on that note, we have an executive session coming up of which we're going to be talking about negotiations. And John, too, before our January 11th meeting, hopefully we'll have some other information that could put us in a better position, or a more solid position, not a better, but just a more solid position with respect to that.
Whoops, you gotta.
Marie.
Maybe this is for Mark, but has there been any further consultation with the hospital and the JAX lab? So the original folks that you consulted with about asymptomatic testing when we first started talking about it in the summer, and they said the metric was that it didn't need to happen and we didn't have the money. And then we, by the fantastic community that we have, the money came forward for that testing. I wasn't sure that the metric change that necessarily suggested that we should go ahead and do it, but we were doing it because we have the money and it's what our community needed and asked for. So my question is, are you continuing to have conversations with those same groups of people about the metric that would require or suggest we should next fall, next school year, continue to, or whenever, continue with asymptomatic testing?
100% yes. I have weekly conversations with individuals from the Down East COVID-19 Task Force, which includes representatives from the hospital, the Jackson Laboratory. The short answer is, Marie, yes. And even if we were not having those weekly meetings, I'm committed to having those continued conversations. I would just say that I've deliberated over this long and hard, and I believe the prudent thing to do is to maintain that funding in our budget. We all want to see the pandemic end. Like anything else, we buy insurance and hope never have to use it. I believe that the prudent thing to do based upon the science and the recommendations of the medical experts and the hospital is to include this in the budget. And we sure hope we don't have to use it. And but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Marie, for that question. I think it's an important one, and I think it is important to keep this in the budget for next year. Christy.
You know, and this is for Nancy, I guess, and this is a big, I'll put you on the spot here. Like what, like across the district, what 1% of our insurance costs might be? I know you're looking at like the AOS budget, but if we were to take the total amount of money we spend on insurance and what that 10% increase looks like in our budget, do you have like an estimate of what like if it came in at 5%, would our district be saving $80,000 that could fund asymptomatic testing? I know that you might have to email that later, I guess.
I'm going to have to give you, because, yeah, I don't have that in my little pea brain. I'm sorry. I will have to email that to you.
It's hard to see.
She'll
Like
have it to you
everybody's
by
budget
tomorrow morning, I guarantee. She'll
Like-
have it by tomorrow morning.
Each percent, I can do, you know, what that would be equivalent to. Also, we do have the assessment breakdown too, Heather, if you want me to go over that.
I think it would be helpful. Thank you.
I did the calculations, you know, each year it's your AOS formula is done on an average of the budgets, the staff size, and the enrollments of each of the schools as an average of each of those. And then each school has to pay 0.5% basically down. And then the balance of that is divvied up by that formula. And there are obviously ups and downs on that each year, depending on the factors for each school. So in those last 2 pages of the budget, it shows the breakdown of the schools, and some of them are up, you know, a bit, and then there are obviously some that are, because it all comes out to the same, comes out to zero as far as the changes. But that shows you, there are 2 scenarios. One is without the additional items, and it shows the breakdown for each of your schools. And the other one is with all of the additional items added in, and that gives you the breakdown there. So I don't know if there are any questions on that formula or the breakdown.
Not seeing any hands at the moment. Thank you, Nancy.
Now, this is still a draft, obviously. Hopefully, you know, if we have any more information, we can, there would be tweaks, but your next meeting in January will be your, what we call the cake meeting. Your annual budget meeting is where you have to finalize the budget. And then it would go forth to a public budget meeting, which we tentatively had slated for like February 1st.
Yep.
So Heather, I just sent again the link to the board. I apologize if anybody didn't get that, but if anybody doesn't get that by tomorrow morning, let me know so I can make sure you do get it. And if anybody needs a printed copy also. And some of the notes I took away were insurance percentages, making sure that we can get that information out to the board within the next couple of days in terms of what those factors might be for changes. Thank you.
Yes, it might take me a day to get all that together because we're still working in last year. We have the auditors here and we're working in this year, of course, and now we're working in next year with all the budgets. So it may take me a day.
Plus CRF, right, Nancy?
That's quite acceptable, Nancy. We'll allow that. Ingrid, I saw your hand, and then we'll move on to action items.
So I just want to circle back to what Christy was saying, because so if we were to keep our insurance at 10%,
Mhm.
and we came in at 0 or 1 or 2 or something, and we had that savings, would we be able to use those funds in this budget and in the rest of our school budgets to pay for the asymptomatic testing, or is that not allowed?
There's a way to do it, but the board, Nancy, there is a way to do it. We'd have to work with our attorneys because it's how it's broken down into each warrant article, correct?
Well, the trouble is that the budget is in, if you budget it in the AOS, how you fund it, you would have to get reimbursed from each of the schools. So if they had the savings in each of the schools enough to cover it, then we could work around that. Yeah.
So if we did not have the asymptomatic testing in the AOS budget, but we left our 10% insurance in the rest, all the other budgets, and we came in at 0% health insurance increase, then we could fund the asymptomatic testing with the insurance money savings in each local budget.
Yes.
Okay. So
Depending on how
I think that's
you came in.
what?
Yes, depending on how low you come in.
Right. But I mean, I think, yeah, but so that is a possible way to keep to allow us to still asymptomatic test in the fall, but not have to incur that in the AOS budget. So I think it's something to think about. I think it's a great idea, Christy, because I mean, I said this at some other meeting. Harbor House is part of the Maine Municipal Employees Health Trust. We notoriously have, our premiums are higher. In the 7 or 8 years we've been with them, we've never had 0. This year we have 0. So the school insurance is always lower than we are. Now, maybe it won't be this time, but I would be really surprised if it comes in at anything. I would bet that it's going to be very low. So that's a possible way to do everything we want to do. So I'll leave it at that.
I'd like an opportunity to work with Nancy over the next couple of days and send the board some information that I think would be helpful and any decisions you may consider in January.
That's what I was going to say is, I think those are some good ideas. There's a couple questions that are out there. Let's get some of that work done and then keep communicating with the board leading up to the January 11th meeting.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Moving on to action items. Mark, I have the approval of administrative review of consolidated MDI RSS AOS 91 emergency response plan.
So for folks who may not have been through this process, the board approves the review of our emergency plan. And these are our school safety plans to include contingencies for any threat you might imagine occurring in a school. I can't thank Ian Braun enough for his work, his legwork, as well as the building administrators and public safety officials. And so we have conducted that review. There are no substantive changes at this time, but we are required to have the board approve that we have reviewed the plan, or we do review the plan annually and then report that to the state. So with that, there are minor edits to include some updates on staffing, but Ian Braun and myself and public safety do not recommend any changes at this time in our emergency response plan.
So for anyone new to the board, this plan, we do not share it publicly, so we don't see it. I think you can talk with Mark if you have particular questions. And we, are approving it based on the fact that it is reviewed annually and, changes are made as necessary. It's like Mark has said, it's reviewed with the police, with public emergency and the different building principals. Mark, is there a specific
The motion would be, Heather, if I may, just to approve that administration has reviewed the consolidated AOS emergency response plan for 2019-2020.
All right, I will take a motion and then any questions people might have.
So moved, Ingrid.
Second.
Second, Lily.
Thank you, guys. Are there any questions? All right, not seeing any hands. I will go through the list. Heather, approve. Susan McCready,
Approved.
Kate Chaplin,
Approved.
Robin Sue,
Approve.
Marie,
Approved.
Lily,
Approve.
Christy,
Approve.
John Bench,
Approve.
John Eisenhower,
Approved.
Ingrid,
Approved.
Jessica Stewart,
Approve.
Carrie,
Approve.
Approve.
Roger,
Approve.
Gary,
Approve.
Darcy,
Approved.
and Aaron.
Approve.
Thank you, everybody. Mark, that is approved. I appreciate that. And thank you for continuing to stay on top of that.
Thank you.
Next, we have consideration of revisions to the 2020-2021 school calendar.
That's attached to the agenda. Julie, can you give a quick overview, please? Julie? Yes? No?
Yes,
Yeah.
if I can figure out how to unmute. Yeah. Sorry about that. Yes, so the two big things that have shifted on the calendar are the inputting of the half day early releases on Thursdays for K-8, which has necessitated a little bit of shifting so that if there was another day that had a early release that day, or if there was a holiday on a Monday, that was accounted for so that there would be no additional early release if the holiday was on a Monday, or if, and it would be a Thursday if it had been a Wednesday or a different day that was the half day on a particular week. That's one change. It's a series of changes, but it's one kind of change. The other kind of change is to move the February 12th PD day to be a full day on January 22nd, which is a Friday, and then Monday, the 25th, and Matt spoke to this, would be also a full day, and then semester 2 would start on the 26th.
Okay. Are there any questions? All right, I'll take a motion.
So moved, Susan.
Thank you, Susan.
Second, Jessica.
Thank you, Jessica. Any questions, comments before I go down the roll call? All right, not seeing any. Heather, approve. Susan McCready,
Approved.
Kate Chaplin,
Approved.
Robin Sue,
Approve.
Marie,
Approved.
Lily,
Approve.
Christy,
Approve.
John Bench,
Approve.
John Eisenhower,
Approve.
Ingrid. Did we lose Ingrid? Oh, we did lose Ingrid for a moment. Jessica Stewart,
Approve.
Harry,
Approve.
Roger,
Approve.
Gary,
Approve.
Darcy,
Approved.
and Aaron,
Approve.
and Ingrid. I'm going back to you.
Approved.
All right. Thank you. That is approved. Thanks, everybody. Mark, moving on to other business, I have middle school.
Heather, I think that's been an item that, with COVID and everything going on, we've been remiss in addressing, but I just wanted to make sure that we had that ever present in our mind. There's a lot going on, but I do want to note that many of our communities, not just Bar Harbor, are looking at space and buildings. And now more than ever, I think the question about what we want to do with our buildings and our communities and how we support teaching learning is ever present in our minds. So there was an ad hoc committee that was established by the board, and there was a lot of work done, but I just wanted to make sure that the board was aware that that was still a question on the minds of many community members, board members, staff. So I don't know if any board member wants to speak to that. I know it's come up in some of the items that have been discussed around restructuring, but just wanted to put it out there. We're still working on this issue.
And I believe in a recent discussion, you and I probably need to sit down and take a look at what is next. And so I'd like to say this is going to, no, I'd like to say that this is going to be on the January agenda. And I think what we should at that point in time have a recommendation of what we need to do next and how to go there. All right, public comment. We don't have any future agenda items. Budget, middle school. Anything else off the top of our head? Mark, nothing. Todd.
I know I've asked this a few times and I just don't understand where we are. I've asked about public comment during this time and trying to find different avenues for our community to give public comment. I know that supposedly we were looking into it for this coming meeting, but I haven't heard anything about that.
No, we weren't, Todd. Thank you for that. I think as
So
we
I just wanted to I just wanted to hear again what our plans are for that, because no one's gotten back to me on that at all.
Well, I think we did have a discussion last week regarding that, and Mark can talk to what we're looking at, but it was never for this meeting. It was for January.
So thank you, Heather. I apologize, Todd. I thought I communicated where we were at, but we consulted with our attorneys. We consulted with technology, and we're looking to bring a platform forward in January. I apologize if I didn't communicate that clearly, but where there'll be folks could submit their public comment in writing or electronically, but if they'd like to do it in person, we're looking at a breakout room. You know, one of the challenges, but certainly not a showstopper, is technology. We have one person within the district doing this, so we're going to have to look with some resources at our local meetings for that to continue, if that's the expectation across local boards. But certainly we're prepared to move forward at the AOS level to incorporate that. And again, I apologize if I didn't make that clear earlier. Thank you.
So I guess I recall that conversation. I thought that we would have that conversation at this meeting. That's what my understanding was, so that we would be prepared for January. So sorry that I misunderstood that, but that was my understanding.
And for those who are not aware, part of what Todd was trying to achieve is to, as we are meeting virtually, is to try and have a public comment that as closely as possible can replicate being public and making a comment, and having that, obviously we don't engage, but having that ability to sort of see and hear from them as opposed to us reading it in, and it's our voice, it's our tone, that sort of situation. I think there's a bit that has to go back locally, and we have to figure out how to have it work locally. And we've talked about having a local board member, someone sort of managing that component of it. So I think there's a couple of things that have to happen. Mark has looked into the way this can work. And then again, at the high school AOS, we could probably make it work pretty easily, but locally we have to look for the support system to make it happen there. Carrie.
I just want to echo the comment that I made in the high school meeting about a request for a kind of budget boot camp with Nancy, if she's willing to do that before the January meeting, for new board members or anybody else who wants to participate.
Thank you, Carrie. All right, not seeing any other hands. Next meeting dates, we have Monday, January 11th, which is the, as Nancy said, the cake meeting. It's the annual budget meeting. And then we have Monday, February 1st, which is the annual public budget meeting. If there aren't any other questions, yep, Christy.
Oh, I guess it's good. Kind of goes back maybe to Todd's question too, is how do we plan on having those meetings if we're still in virtual? I mean, we might have to have a drive up, vote by your car meeting in the high school parking lot in February. And I don't think we're getting any cake in January. So I think we might want to start working on alternative plans for how we're going to pass this budget if we can't meet in person.
Thank you. Yep, we'll do that. Susan McCready, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I just had a question, and this may be something that was presented earlier and I missed it. I'm not sure, or even in previous meeting, but Julie did such a wonderful presentation on the assessment of the learning and growth in the elementaries. And I'm just wondering if there's a similar model or metric that can be used to predict the growth and learning in the grades 9 through 12.
Heather, can I answer?
Please.
So Marie sent me the same message, and the issue is that we don't have an assessment tool that we have that we can compare to previous years. With all of the changes in the state assessment and so forth, we don't have anything that would be exactly comparable. That said, I can work with Julie Kay and Matt and Ian, and we can take a look at what we can take a look at, which would be attendance, which would be course failures, which would be some other metrics that we can go a little bit more into depth with some of the things that Matt mentioned this evening. But we don't have we typically would have an 11th grade assessment. We would typically have a 10th grade PSAT. We did not have those last year, and we won't have them this year because of decisions that the state has made. We haven't talked at this point about what we might do to get a sort of point in time, and I'm waiting for the final decisions from the state as to how they're going to handle the state assessment before I share a plan with all of you. So a little dicey. I'll put what I can, but it's not parallel. I can't do a parallel presentation.
Right, but I appreciate any information on that. I think it's just important to maybe keep that on the future agenda.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you, Julie. All right, seeing nothing else, I will take a motion to go into executive session.
So moved, Lily.
Thanks, Lily. Is there a second?
Second, Kate.
Thanks, Kate. I'll run through the vote again. Heather, yes. Susan McCready?
Yes.
Kate Chaplin?
Yes.
Robin Sue?
Yes.
Marie?
Yes.
Lily?
Yes.
Christy?
Yes.
John Bench?
Yep.
John Eisenhower?
Yes.
Ingrid?
Yes.
Jessica Stewart?
Yes.
Harry Hayes?
Yes.
Roger Sanamon?
Yes.
Gary Burr?
Yes.
Darcy Throckmorton?
Yes.
And Aaron Brown?
Yes.
All right, thank you guys. So Mark, my guess is we are staying here. Everybody else is checking off. Okay. So I think we have Mark and Nancy will be staying. Goodbye, Julie. Goodbye, principals. Thank you, everybody. Melissa.